I heard it before I understood it. Not a roar, not a scream, just rocks shifting high above me, slow at first, like something had disturbed the slope without meaning to. I stopped walking immediately, my boots grinding against loose gravel as I tilted my head upward into the darkness. The mountain rose steep above the trail, jagged and unstable, barely visible under the faint moonlight. Shadows swallowed everything past a certain height, and yet something was moving up there. A faint trickle of stone sliding down, tapping against other rocks, cascading softly in a way that should have felt natural, but it didn't, because it didn't stop. I waited, listened. The sound continued, not louder, not faster, just consistent, like it wasn't random, like it had direction. My chest tightened slightly as I took a slow step backward, eyes still scanning the slope above, trying to find the source. Nothing, just darkness and uneven terrain. Then, a large rock broke loose. It tumbled down, bouncing twice before stopping just a few feet from me. I stared at it, then slowly lifted my gaze back up, and that's when I realized something was wrong. The slope wasn't settling, it was preparing. The small stones weren't falling randomly anymore, they were shifting together, like something massive had just adjusted its weight and was deciding where to go next. I stepped back again, heart beginning to pound harder now. The mountain above me felt aware, not watching, not alive in the way something should be, but positioned, like it had been waiting there long before I arrived. And the moment I moved again, the sound changed. Not louder, not faster, just committed. The sound didn't grow all at once. It tightened, like something vast had just locked into place above me and decided the direction it would take. The loose gravel at my feet shifted slightly, not enough to move me, just enough to tell me the slope was no longer stable. I looked up again, forcing my eyes into the darkness, trying to find a shape, a source, anything that made sense. There was nothing to see, and that was the worst part, because the sound wasn't chaotic. It wasn't the random collapse of rock. It was controlled, measured. A low, dragging movement started to build above me, deeper now, heavier, like something massive had begun to slide but was holding itself back just enough to stay together. I took a step backward, then another. My breathing sharpened as the air itself seemed to vibrate slightly, carrying the sound down in waves that didn't match gravity alone. Then, something shifted fast. A cluster of rocks broke free and rushed down the slope, scattering across the trail in front of me. I flinched instinctively, stepping back harder this time, my heel slipping slightly on loose ground. The moment I regained balance, everything above me went silent, completely still. No sliding, no falling, nothing. The silence hit harder than the noise, because now it felt like a pause, not an end, a decision. My chest rose and fell quickly as I stood there, frozen, staring into the darkness where the movement had come from. Every instinct told me to run, but I didn't move yet, because something about that silence felt watchful, like whatever had just shifted was waiting for me to commit first. And then I made the mistake. I turned slightly, just enough to check the trail behind me, just enough to think about escape. And the moment my attention broke, the mountain above me didn't rumble. It didn't collapse. It didn't warn me. It simply let go. It didn't start like an avalanche. There was no gradual build, no rolling thunder warning me to run. It started as a single, impossible motion. A section of the mountain shifted as one piece, not breaking apart, not crumbling, sliding. My eyes snapped upward just in time to see it. An entire mass of rock peeling away from the slope, but holding shape in a way that made no sense. It wasn't falling, it wasn't collapsing, it was moving with intent. And it was coming straight down. The sound hit a second later, deep, violent, overwhelming, like the mountain had finally decided to speak after holding its breath too long. The ground beneath me trembled, small stones jumping and skittering across the trail as the massive shape above gained speed. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing as my brain struggled to process what I was seeing, because it wasn't just rock. It was too smooth in motion, too aligned. Parts of it shifted mid-slide, adjusting angles, redirecting its descent in subtle ways that no natural fall could ever do. It was steering. My heart slammed violently in my chest as I turned to run, boots slipping on gravel as I pushed forward down the trail. The sound behind me grew rapidly, not spreading outward like an avalanche would, but narrowing, focused, directed exactly where I was. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to see how close it was, but I felt it. A pressure building behind me, the air itself being pushed forward by something massive, gaining speed with every second. Then, something hit near my shoulder, a rock, sharp, fast. It tore past me and slammed into the ground ahead, bouncing violently before disappearing off the trail. I flinched, stumbling again, barely catching myself as I kept running. More followed, not scattered, not random, targeted, each one striking closer than the last. And that's when the realization hit me harder than anything else. This wasn't a landslide. It wasn't gravity. It wasn't nature breaking loose. It was something that had been waiting at the top of the mountain, holding itself together, just to come down exactly when I stopped paying attention. I ran harder than I ever had in my life, but the trail didn't feel like a path anymore. It felt like a funnel. Every step forward narrowed something behind me. The sound wasn't just chasing me now, it was locking onto me. The ground vibrated in pulses, not random tremors, but timed impacts, heavy, rhythmic, like something massive was shifting its weight again and again as it descended. Each pulse came faster than the last, closer, too closer. I risked a glance over my shoulder. That was my mistake, because for the first time, I saw it clearly. It wasn't a landslide. It wasn't even a pile of rock. It was a single, enormous mass holding together in a way that defied everything I understood. Layers of stone folded over each other like muscle, bending and compressing as it slid, adjusting its shape mid-motion to maintain speed. And at the front of it, something opened. Not a crack, not a break. A gap. Wide, dark, deliberate. Like the entire mountain had formed a mouth. My chest tightened violently as I snapped my head forward again, pushing my legs harder, ignoring the burning in my muscles, the instability of the ground beneath me. Behind me, the sound changed. Not louder, worse. It became smoother, faster, like friction had stopped affecting it, like it had found the perfect angle, the perfect path, the perfect speed. And then I realized something that made everything else feel meaningless. The trail I was running on wasn't random. It curved slightly, subtly, guiding me downward in a direction I hadn't questioned until now. But the moment I noticed it, I understood. I wasn't escaping it. I was being lined up. The mountain wasn't chasing me blindly, it was using the slope, using gravity, using the path itself to make sure there was only one place I could go, and it had already calculated exactly where I would be when it got there. The ground dipped suddenly ahead of me, a narrow drop in the trail. I tried to slow, too late. My foot slipped, my body lurched forward, and behind me, the mountain adjusted again, not reacting, predicting. I hit the ground hard. The impact knocked the air out of me in a single, brutal burst, my chest slamming against rock and gravel as my body skidded forward down the slope. My hands scraped instinctively, fingers clawing for anything to slow me, but the ground beneath me was loose, unstable, nothing to hold on to, nothing to stop the momentum, and behind me, it didn't slow. If anything, it accelerated. The sound changed again, deepening into something smoother, heavier, like the entire mass had just found a cleaner path to descend. No more resistance, no more interruption, just speed. I forced myself up, stumbling to my feet with barely any control, my legs shaking as I pushed forward again. My breathing was broken now, uneven, sharp gasps that barely filled my lungs, but I didn't stop. I couldn't, because I felt it now, not just behind me, around me. The air itself had pressure, like something massive was displacing it as it came down. Every step forward felt like I was running into something pushing back against me. Then the rocks started hitting again, harder this time, faster. One slammed into the ground beside my foot, exploding into smaller fragments that cut across my leg. Another struck just ahead of me, bouncing once before disappearing down the slope. They weren't random, they were being thrown, not tossed outward like debris, directed, each one landing closer to where I was about to step. I tried to change direction, veering slightly off the trail, forcing my body sideways toward a cluster of large rocks that might give me cover. The moment I shifted, the sound behind me shifted with me, not delayed, not adjusting after the fact. It matched instantly, perfectly, like it had already accounted for that move before I made it. My stomach dropped. There was no path, no alternate route, no escape direction, because it wasn't reacting to where I was. It was already moving toward where I would be next, and then something massive struck the ground behind me, not a rock, not debris, a piece of it. The impact shook the entire slope, sending a shock through the ground that nearly threw me forward again. I glanced back for a split second and saw the gap again, closer now, much closer, wider. The mouth of it stretching open as the mass adjusted around it, reshaping itself mid-slide, like the entire mountain had one purpose now, to close that distance. And for the first time since this started, I realized something that made everything else irrelevant. It wasn't trying to crush me. It wasn't trying to bury me. It wasn't even trying to hit me. It was trying to reach me intact. I didn't try to outrun it anymore because something inside me finally understood. Speed didn't matter. Direction didn't matter. Nothing I did was changing the outcome. I forced myself to cut sharply off the trail, boots slipping as I pushed sideways across the slope, aiming for a cluster of jagged rocks that jutted out from the mountain like broken teeth. If I could get behind something solid, something anchored, maybe it would pass over me. maybe it would miss. But even as I moved, I felt it. That immediate correction behind me, not a delay, not a reaction, a realignment. The sound shifted again, the massive sliding force angling slightly, tightening its descent to follow the new path I had chosen. The ground beneath me tilted harder, loose gravel cascading under my feet as I struggled to maintain balance. It wasn't just coming down anymore, it was tracking across. I reached the rocks and threw myself behind them, pressing my body against the cold surface, trying to make myself smaller, stiller, anything that might make me less targetable. The vibration in the ground intensified instantly. Closer, too close. The air around me compressed, thick and heavy, like the space itself was being pushed inward by something too large to pass cleanly through it. Then it slowed, not stopping, but adjusting. The massive sound of sliding stone dropped in intensity, becoming more controlled, more deliberate. The pulses in the ground spread out slightly, each one heavier than the last, like it was recalculating, like it had reached a point where speed wasn't enough anymore. I pressed harder into the rocks, barely breathing, my entire body locked in place as I listened. The silence between impacts grew longer, long enough for something else to be heard. A deep grinding shift above me, not sliding, not falling, something lifting. My eyes widened as I slowly tilted my head upward, just enough to see past the edge of the rock I was hiding behind. And what I saw didn't make sense. Part of the mass had stopped descending. It had risen slightly, like a section of it had anchored itself mid-slope, while the rest continued to move, creating an angle, creating a new line. And that gap, that dark, open space I had seen before, was no longer facing downward. It was turning, aligning, directly toward where I was hiding. My chest tightened violently as I realized what it was doing. It wasn't trying to run me over anymore. It wasn't relying on speed. It was adjusting its entire descent, just to reach around the obstacle, just to get me even here, even hidden, even still. And as the ground trembled beneath me once more, I understood something that made hiding meaningless. It didn't lose sight of me when I broke line of sight. It didn't guess. It didn't search. It already knew exactly where I was, even when I stopped moving. I stayed pressed against the rock even after I understood it won't help. There was no instinct left telling me to run. No part of me believed movement would change anything anymore, because the sound above me had changed again, not louder, not faster, closer, controlled in a way that didn't belong to anything natural. The grinding shift of stone had become deliberate, like each movement of that massive body was being placed exactly where it needed to be, one adjustment at a time. I didn't need to see it to know what was happening. It was repositioning around me. The air thickened further, pressing against my chest, making every breath feel shallow, incomplete. Small fragments of gravel began to slide past the rock I was hiding behind, tickling downward in thin, steady lines. Not falling, being displaced. I clenched my hands against the ground, trying to stay anchored, trying to remain as still as possible, as if stillness might make me less important. But something inside me already knew. It wasn't looking for movement. It wasn't tracking noise. It wasn't reacting to anything I was doing. It was working off something else entirely, something I couldn't control. The ground shifted again, heavier this time, not a vibration, a presence, like something massive had just settled into position directly above me. I forced myself to look up, slowly, carefully, and for a moment, I couldn't understand what I was seeing because the slope above me wasn't empty anymore. It wasn't descending, it wasn't collapsing, it was hanging. An enormous section of the mountain had curved inward, folding over itself in a way that defied gravity completely. Layers of rock bent and compressed, forming a massive overhang that hadn't been there before. And at the center of it, that gap, that dark, unnatural opening, now facing directly down at me. It didn't look like a crack anymore. It looked intentional, defined, like the entire structure had reshaped itself just to form it properly. And it was still adjusting. Subtle shifts along its edges, widening slightly, refining its position like something aligning a mechanism before activation. My body locked completely. No movement, no sound, just the overwhelming certainty that I had been located perfectly. Then, everything went still. No sliding, no grinding, no falling, nothing. The silence hit harder than anything before it, because now there was no distance left, no momentum, no chaos, just precision. And in that stillness, something inside that opening shifted. Not rock, not debris, something deeper, something that didn't belong to the mountain at all. And in that moment, I understood the final truth I had been trying to avoid. This thing didn't rely on speed to catch prey. Speed was just the approach. This was the part where it actually fed. It didn't drop on me. That's what I expected. The weight, the collapse, the sudden end under tons of stone, but it didn't come down. It reached. The mass above shifted in a way that broke every rule of gravity I understood. Instead of falling, it extended. Layers of rock sliding over each other in controlled motion, bending downward like something enormous, leaning in closer rather than collapsing. The opening widened, not cracking, stretching. Edges grinding outward as if something inside needed more space to pass through. I couldn't move, not because I was trapped, because I understood movement wouldn't matter anymore. A section of the rock peeled away from the main mass, not breaking off, not falling, but lowering, guided, like a limb forming out of the mountain itself. It hovered just above the ground in front of me, displacing dust and loose gravel without touching them, close enough that I could feel it. Not heat, not cold. Presence. Something immense and focused entirely on me. Then it moved again. Faster. That extended mass slid forward, skimming the surface of the slope with terrifyingly precision, closing the last distance between us in a single controlled motion. I tried to push back. My hands slipped instantly. The ground gave way beneath me, dragging me forward just enough. Just enough to break the last bit of distance. The rock didn't crush me. It caught me, pressed against my side, my back, my legs, not with force meant to destroy, but with pressure meant to hold. The surface wasn't solid the way it should have been. It shifted slightly under contact, adjusting to my shape, preventing any space from forming between me and it, containing me. The opening above lowered further, closer, larger, and now I could see inside it. Not darkness, not empty space, movement, slow, heavy, like something deeper inside the mountain was repositioning itself to receive what had just been delivered. My chest tightened violently as I struggled, twisting against the pressure, trying to pull free, but every movement I made was matched instantly. The rock around me shifted with me, tightening just enough to stop escape without crushing me. It wasn't holding me still, it was keeping me intact. The realization hit harder than anything before it. This wasn't about impact, this wasn't about being buried or broken. This was controlled, deliberate, and whatever was inside that opening was waiting for me to be brought closer. The mass beneath me shifted again, and this time it started to lift. The ground dropped away beneath me, not suddenly, not violently, controlled. The mass holding me didn't climb the slope, it reserved it. The rock beneath my body shifted upward, carrying me with it as if gravity had been reassigned to follow whatever this thing decided. My boots scraped uselessly against stone that no longer behaved like ground. Every inch I tried to push against simply aligned to stop me. I wasn't being dragged anymore. I was being raised. The opening above grew larger the closer I got, its edges grinding outward in slow, deliberate adjustments. Pebbles and dust didn't fall from it. They hovered for a fraction too long before settling, like the space inside it didn't fully agree with the rules outside. I tried to twist free again, driving my shoulder into the surface, forcing my weight into the opposite direction. The rock shifted instantly, matching me, canceling the effort before it even formed. My breath hitched hard as I realized it wasn't responding to force, it was responding to intention. The moment I thought about pushing away, it adjusted. The moment I tried to pull back, it tightened. There was no delay, no reaction time. It was already where my exact next movement would be. Above me, something inside the opening moved again. Not a slide, not a collapse. A deeper shift, like layers of the mountain were rearranging around a central space that needed to be cleared. Prepared. I was close enough now to see inside, not clearly. Nothing in there held shape long enough to understand, but there was motion that didn't belong to rock. Slow, heavy displacement that suggested something far larger existed behind what I could see. Something using the mountain the way a body uses muscle. The mass beneath me tilted slightly, repositioning, aligning me upward, aligning my body with the center of that opening. My hands scraped against the surface again, fingers digging into grooves that formed and vanished under pressure, offering grip for less than a second before smoothing out again. It wasn't denying me escape, it was removing the possibility of it. The air grew thicker the higher I was lifted, harder to breathe, like the space near the opening didn't fully support anything living. Each inhale came shorter, sharper, like my lungs were pulling in less than what was there. Then everything slowed. The movement didn't stop, it refined. Every shift became smaller, more precise, like the final positioning of something before completion. I was inches away now, close enough that the darkness inside wasn't just above me, it was around me, and in that closeness I noticed something that made everything else irrelevant. The opening wasn't just wide, it was curved, shaped, not randomly, deliberately, formed to receive something exactly my size. My body lifted one last time, perfectly aligned, and the mass holding me adjusted once more, not tighter, not harder, just enough to make sure nothing would break, nothing would tear, nothing would be lost, because whatever this thing did next, it required me whole. The moment I crossed into it, Everything went quiet, not muffled, not distant, gone. The grinding of stone, the shifting weight, the constant pressure of movement, everything that had surrounded me just seconds before disappeared completely, like sound itself didn't exist past that threshold. The rock around me loosened slightly, not releasing me, repositioning, guiding. I was no longer being pushed from behind. I was being moved through. The surface that held me shifted inward, carrying me deeper into the opening without friction, without resistance. Like I had been placed on something that knew exactly how to move me without causing damage. My vision struggled instantly. The darkness inside wasn't just the absence of light, it felt dense, layered, like my eyes couldn't settle on a single depth. Shapes formed and dissolved before I could understand them, angles bending in ways that didn't hold steady long enough to process, and then I felt it. Not around me, below, something vast shifting beneath the layers of stone, slow, heavy, deliberate. The entire structure moved with it, not collapsing, not unstable, coordinated, like the mountain wasn't just something it inhabited, it was something it controlled from within. My body slid further, deeper, the pressure around me adjusting constantly to keep me centered, aligned, intact. Every time I tensed, every time I tried to brace or resist, the surface beneath me smoothed out, removing anything I could push against. There was no friction here, no grip, no resistance, only direction. The darkness ahead opened slightly, not with light, but with space, a faint shift in density that allowed me to see something, not clearly, but enough. The inside wasn't solid, it was layered, channels, passages, sections of rock that moved independently while still being part of a single structure. Some areas contracted as others expanded, creating a slow, rhythmic motion that guided everything inward, guided me inward, and deeper still, something waited. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. A presence larger than the entire mass that had come down the mountain, something that didn't need to rush, didn't need to chase, didn't need to react, because everything else, every movement, every adjustment, every precise alignment had already brought me exactly where I needed to be. The passage beneath me tilted slightly downward. The movement changed again, slower now, more controlled, like the final stage of something that had been calculated long before I ever stepped onto that trail. And as the darkness thickened around me, pressing closer without touching, closing off everything behind me, I realized something that made everything else feel small. The slide, the speed, the chase. None of that was the hunt. That was just how it collected. This was where it actually began to consume. I stopped thinking in terms of escape because there was no direction left that qualified as a way. The passage carried me deeper in a slow, controlled descent, the kind of movement that didn't feel like falling anymore. It felt like being placed, guided, delivered into a space that had been waiting long before I arrived. The pressure around me shifted again, not tighter, more precise, like whatever was moving me had reached a stage where even minor adjustments mattered. My body was angled slightly now, turned just enough that I could no longer see where I had entered from. The darkness behind me wasn't just blocked, it felt erased, as if the mountain had decided there was nothing worth showing me back there anymore. Ahead, the internal structure widened briefly, not into a room, into a chamber. But even that word didn't feel right because nothing about it was still, nothing about it was empty. The stone itself moved in slow, coordinated patterns like breathing made of rock. Sections expanded while others compressed, forming shifting pathways that opened and closed without warning, always keeping a central direction intact towards something deeper, something I still couldn't fully see. The surface beneath me adjusted again, lowering me gently into a broader section of the structure. The moment I touched it, the pressure changed. Not painful, not crushing, but absolute, like the mountain had finally decided I had arrived. My hands twitched instinctively, searching for a resistance, for edges, for anything I could use to push myself away, but there was nothing. Every surface smoothed the moment I tried to engage it, removing friction before effort could even form. It wasn't restraining me anymore, it was stabilizing me. Then I saw movement ahead, not the shifting of stone, something separate, a slow, deliberate presence passing through the layered structure, not approaching quickly, not rushing, but moving with certainty like it didn't need urgency to reach anything. Each time it passed behind a layer of rock, the stone itself adjusted slightly, opening just enough to let it through. No resistance, no obstruction, only permission. My breath tightened as I realized the scale of it again, not just the size of what had slid down the mountain, but what existed beneath it, what had been waiting under the slope the entire time. The slight rock boulder wasn't just what fell, it was what extended, what reached, what collected, and now I was inside the part where distance no longer mattered. The movement ahead slowed, stopped, not abruptly, not suddenly, just settled, like something had arrived exactly where it intended to be, and in the silence that followed, I felt it again. That same awareness from earlier, but now without distance between us, not watching from above, not chasing from behind. Now, it was inside the same space as me. The silence inside the mountain wasn't empty, it was attentive, like the entire structure had stopped shifting just to let one thing become clear. I couldn't see it properly anymore. The passage had narrowed into something that felt less like space and more like intention, every direction subtly guiding my body forward, keeping me centered, keeping me available. My breath came shallow, not because I was restrained the way I had been before, but because the air itself felt assigned, measured, limited only to what was necessary. Then the movement returned, not around me, ahead. A slow, deliberate pressure gathered in the darkness, and the stone layers responded instantly, not collapsing, not breaking, but opening in sequence, like a path being revealed step by step for something that never needed to hesitate. I felt myself shift again, not dragged, not pushed, positioned. And that's when I understood what this entire descent had been. The slide wasn't the attack, it wasn't even the capture, it was the delivery system. Everything, the sound above the trail, the controlled avalanche, the narrowing path, the impossible steering through terrain. I hadn't been running from something falling. I had been running inside something that was bringing me here on purpose. The chamber ahead finally revealed itself, not as a room, not as a cavity, but as a deep, layered convergence where stone no longer behaved like stone. Sections of the mountain folded inward in slow cycles, creating a vast central space that felt less built and more grown. And its center, Something waited, not fully visible, not fully formed in a way my mind could accept. Just presence, massive, still, and completely certain that I had arrived exactly as intended. The surface beneath me tilted one final time, easing me forward into the central line of that space. No resistance remained anywhere around me now. Even the stone that had been guiding me stopped correcting my movement because there was nothing left to correct. I was aligned. The movement ahead stopped again, closer now, so close I could feel it without understanding it. And in that final stillness, I realized something that made every moment before this feel like preparation for a truth I never wanted to reach. The slide rock boulder didn't hunt on mountains, it used mountains. And once something was delivered this deep, there was no slope left to escape back up. Only the part where the mountain stops being terrain and becomes something that keeps what it catches.